Major story tonight on our agenda. Republicans on the House Judiciary Committee, they have sent a letter to the Department of Justice. Finally, they're calling for a special counsel to be appointed. Finally, this time to investigate major scandals with real evidence surrounding Hillary Clinton, James Comey, former Attorney General Loretta Lynch. It's about time they did this, used their authority, subpoena power, to restore law in the country. Guess what? We need equal justice under the law. And we've been telling you this for months on the program. There is a massive double standard when it comes to investigating scandals, in this case, that involve Democrats. And the Republicans are in charge. Now, these are scandals that, of course, the destroyed Trump establishment media, they just routinely ignore despite mountains and mountains of evidence. There's Hillary Clinton, her mishandling of top secret, classified, special access program information on a private email server in a mom and pop shop bathroom. We also know that Clinton deleted, imagine if Donald Trump deleted 33,000 emails and acid washed her computers with bleach bit and then smashed mobile devices with a hammer the way she did. And then, of course, her lawyers did turn over BlackBerries to the FBI, but guess what? They didn't have SIM cards. Then there's the real Russia collusion story, the Uranium One deal, which I predict will be the biggest news to come out in the next year or two, where the Secretary of State, remember, she approved handing over up to 20% of America's uranium, the foundational material of nuclear weapons, to Vladimir Putin and the Russians, all while people involved in the deal in Canada, they kicked back over $145 million to the Clinton Foundation. Bill Clinton doubled his speaking fees in Moscow. Then you got James Comey testifying under oath. He had a friend leaking comments to the New York Times, some of which were classified, we're told, government information. He's not allowed to do it. Well, that could be a crime also. Comey may have violated the law. That was government property, and that could be a violation of the Espionage Act. Also, Comey admitted before Congress, yes, the former Attorney General, Loretta Lynch, pressured him not to tell the truth, that the Clinton email investigation was an investigation. Well, she wanted to call the matter, and he ended up listening. And as for Lynch, just days before Comey's announcement that let Hillary off the hook, she met Bill Clinton for 40 minutes in an airport tarmac. Conflict of interest. And, of course, there's the group behind the fake news anti-Trump dossier. It's about the hookers in Russia that turned out not to be true. Fusion GPS. Well, who was paying for that hit piece? Who were they tied to? Because they had ties to Russia. And as we've been saying for months, the evidence is overwhelming, staggering, and incontrovertible, and the Justice Department needs to do the right thing, appoint a special counsel, get to the bottom of all of these scandals. Also, finally tonight, a stunning report from our friend John Solomon at The Hill about how former Obama Director of National Intelligence James Clapper made it much easier to unmask members of Congress. Really? And their staffers? Well, that opens the floodgates for Fourth Amendment privacy violations. Here with reaction from The Hill, John Solomon himself, conservative commentator Monica Crowley. Okay, so really we have the former Director of National Intelligence, then we had the issue of Susan Rice. Then we learned from your friend Sarah Carter that the general counsel of the FBI is being investigated for also leaking intelligence information. Why is this unmasking story by Clapper so important?
Well, it goes to a very important issue, which is the Founding Fathers created a separation of powers, right? They said the Congress and the executive branch and the judiciary were supposed to be independent co-equals. And if the executive branch could on its own begin unmasking information about members of Congress, it opens the door for them to spy on things that are being said about them or things that they themselves were talking about when they're intercepted overseas. And I think this standard and change, back in 1992, CIA Director for George H.W. Bush, Bob Gates, he put out a standard that made unmasking a last resort. You'd only unmask a member of Congress if there's no other way to get foreign intelligence. James Clapper, and maybe leading up to the point where James Clapper issued this menu, there may have been some changes. Change it to a standard of convenience, which is if it helps you understand a report, you can unmask a member of Congress. Privacy issue and a separation of powers issue, I think.
But then we got General Flynn was leaked on. That's a felony. That's a crime. I am hearing, and my sources are telling me, that huge names in the Obama administration, we have Susan Rice, now we're looking into Clapper, but names that everybody will know are going to also be revealed in this scandal, that this was widespread at the top. Are you hearing that?
Yeah, yes, and in fact, if you look at the rules, one of the things that Clapper did is he widened the circle of people that could unmask a name without any written permission. It used to be just the defense secretary, the secretary of state, the president, the vice president, and the national security advisor, the only 5 people to have special access to unmasked information. When Clapper put out the rules in 2013, it expanded to all of their deputies and all of their advisors. And I think that's going to be an interesting area for us to look at in the weeks ahead.
All right, Monica, let me ask you this. So the Republican Party, they're not accomplishing their promises. They're not keeping even a simple one like repeal and replace. I was very happy the president really went in and said, do your job, don't quit. But more importantly, they have subpoena powers. They have the power that we have given them. They're now in charge of these committees. And only now are they finally beginning to realize that the Democrats and the media want the president destroyed, and that there's far more evidence of real wrongdoing and felonies committed, and only now they're getting in the game.
6 months into the fact. Look, Sean, I really believe that there are some Republicans, not all, but there are some on Capitol Hill who are as interested as Democrats and the media are in destroying Donald Trump. And I'm referring to establishment Republican types who are interested in torpedoing the agenda of the president, which also happens to be the Republican agenda. So it's a self-destructive act. But because Donald Trump represents such an existential threat to the establishment on both sides, as well as to the media and the deep state and the permanent federal bureaucracy, that there are elements on all sides that are actively trying to undermine him, even if that means losing the grip on their own agenda, even if that means perhaps even losing the House, because Trump represents such an overwhelming threat that they're willing to destroy him and take him down. And by the way, the country, by failing to repeal and replace Obamacare, by having tax reform in a chaotic mess already.
Why aren't they keeping It's now 8 months, and they haven't kept a simple promise.
Well, and again, it gets to a point, and I realize my point is quite controversial here, but it's not just the Democrats, the far left, and the media that are out to destroy Donald Trump. Remember, he is a very interesting kind of figure
care more about,
that threatens everybody on both sides.
So they don't care if they lose, as long as they hurt the president.
Think about it this way.
Republicans, you're saying that.
Yes, not all, obviously, but I think there are elements in the Republican Party that are as interested as the Democrats and the left and the media in taking this president down, making sure he doesn't succeed. Remember, you and I have talked about this repeatedly, that Donald Trump needs to deliver one thing. That's a booming economy. He needs congressional help to do that. The 2 elements of that are tax reform and repealing and replacing Obamacare.
Do you expect this is going to happen on his economic plan?
If he can't get those 2 elements in, it's going to flatten the U.S. economy.
Do you think they'll do this to his economic agenda?
I am not sure. I mean, already now the talk on tax reform is, well, it's also in chaos on Capitol Hill. If they are really interested in serving the American people, they will make sure that that agenda goes forward. All
right, let me ask
and that
John
the economy is one set on a growth path.
That's a chilling. They're part of my 5 against the president, so I agree with you, but we'll ask Eric Trump about it later tonight. Do you believe that, based on the information that you haven't shared with us yet, and I know you're investigating every day, Sarah Carter is as well, that this whole narrative flips? Because I believe it will boomerang.
I do think that there's a growing number of lawmakers beginning to ask questions that they weren't asking at the beginning of this controversy back in January. And one of the interesting things about Congress, when something hits their backyard, they always seem to take it a little more seriously than when it's just in the media. Today's story is about members of Congress' own privacy, their own separation of powers potentially be putting at risk. And I think people are going to ask some questions about this and how did we get to this point? To Monica's point, I think there's another dynamic that goes on. Lawmakers always worry about getting reelected themselves, right? And they're always afraid that someone's going to accuse them of being soft on terrorism if you don't give the intelligence community all it wants. I think people will go back and look at 2013 and ask some important questions.
Right.
Yeah, I will say this. I love our intelligence community, and they risk their lives to keep us safe. And the 99.9% do such a good job. But if the tools we give them, the weapons of intelligence, are turned on the American people, the way we're discussing here, that is the foundation of a police state. So that 0.5% or half of 1%, that might be misusing it, that's the deep state that needs to go. Thank you both.
And that would constitute the most dangerous scandal in U.S. history.
Absolutely agree. Absolutely. When we come back, the Deputy Assistant to the President, Dr. Gorker, he'll join us to talk about how can you deal with North Korea.
We have some interesting situations that we'll handle. North Korea, Middle East, lots of problems that we inherited from previous administrations, but we'll take care of them. We'll take care of them very well. We'll handle North Korea. We're going to be able to handle